Hey everyone. So today we have Norman here. Norman is a Canadian, originally from Montreal. Now he lives in Shanghai. He works for FDI, which does legal and consulting for foreign businesses. If that wants to set up in China, who wants to do employment, they do employment law as well as, I believe, intellectual property and helping people actually set up their WFOE in China. So Norman is their legal advisor and really the guy to go to for any employment law as well as setting up your WFOE. So today, I'm very, very glad that he's here to share some of the information for us to kind of give us an idea what it takes for a foreign business to establish themselves in China and what they need to watch out for in terms of employment as well as, intellectual properties. So Norman, how's it going, man?
Doing great. It's
Okay.
9 in the morning here.
I know. So all dressed up, I see. So Norman, I know you're from Montreal, so I'm in Toronto, so that's kind of cool. And I know you were in China about 3 years ago. I think you said as a foreign exchange student. Is that correct?
Yeah. Well, the story began with a student exchange in Beijing. Now I've been in Shanghai almost 3 years. So in less than 2 weeks, it's going to be 3 years. It goes very quickly.
So you were originally, you went to in Beijing first. What did you study there? Like, why did you go to Beijing?
Frankly, I took it a bit randomly. I kind of realized, hey, I'm going to China almost on my way to the airport. And then I just fell in love with it. So yeah. I was not even done with this. It was just a summer exchange very quickly. And I was not even done. I was like, I'm going to come back and work in China.
So hold on. So were you studying law back here in Canada?
Industrial relations.
Okay, and then you kind of decided let's take an exchange program, and China was the place that you kind of picked. And how long were you in Beijing for?
It was very short, only like a summer, so about a month and a half, 2 months.
Okay, so that was the exchange program, correct? The 2 months is the exchange program.
Yeah, that was my first exchange in Beijing.
And then you kind of you got yourself settled in Shanghai. That's what happened after.
Exactly. Then I spent about a year and a half, but like in the year and a half, it was really like everything China, books, online classes, conference, and was really gathering knowledge on. Yeah. Then eventually I managed to make the move.
Yeah.
A bit of a dive of faith, and I work hard and a little bit of luck, and I found employment.
Okay, so how did you get into doing legal advising for in China?
Yeah, so industrial relations is HR, labor relation, a little bit of labor law, and then I did actually 3 student exchange doing with always a class of labor law, of the local labor law. Yeah. And then my first employment was actually BD in an employment law firm.
BD.
So I really have a strong focus on employment law. And then more recently this year, earlier in 2018, then I joined FDI China.
Okay. So can you as a foreigner in Shanghai, I'm born in Shanghai, so I guess it's a little bit different if I share, because I technically was born, I grew up there for 8 years, then I moved here. So as a foreigner who, you grew up here in the West, and now you're in China. China's completely different, right? Like I've been to Japan, I've been to, US, Europe, but China is different. Even Hong Kong is different than China, especially like Shanghai, because the culture shock is so big. So how do you, what would you tell somebody, a foreign executive or a director that's going to be there working in their business there? What would you tell them?
I think both professionally and for business or personally as well. Yeah, you have to be, it's a balancing act, between, I would say, being open-minded, things are different and you should expect it, and also having your principle that you stick to it. It's so easy to say it's cultural difference, that's how we do here, but you should still have some standard that you stick with. I think that's very important.
Yeah, I think that's true. So growing up in So I know how it is back there, and it's easy to get yourself lost. It's quite different. It really is quite different. Even if you go into a restaurant, going anywhere, it's just different, right? You can't even get cold water there. It's a rarity version. You get warm water, right? It's like you can't get a cold. If you order for ice Coke, it's like, it's not normal. It's not normal there, right?
But there's more and more, I think, and we could even make a parallel in general. China had a big boom, a big growth, and it's still there. But things are settling up, and the industries, the talents, everything is getting a little bit more mature. I think there's still a lot of room for opportunities, but it's no longer let's just go there and whatever happens, it's likely going to be profitable.
Oh no.
So you have to be a bit maybe more careful than before.
Oh, absolutely. So I think Shanghai is a lot better. I mean, especially when I went back, recently, just noticing, like when I grew up, literally there's like zero subway. It was just being built. That was the first subway. There's like very little, right? Now it's insane. Like when I grew up, seeing a foreigner was rare. It really is rare. Now it's everywhere. If it depending on where you go in Shanghai, but there's a certain area, it's just everywhere. Like it's just common. A lot of people work there.
Yeah.
So, anyways, let's not get into that because we can really go on hours for just talking about that. So, what's more important is really I want our viewers to kind of get an understanding, because a lot of the people coming to us ask, how do we set up a WFOE in China? How do we start employing people? How do we protect ourselves in China? I think these are the more important things. And you're the person that I think have a lot of answer for them. So in terms of, registering a wholly owned foreign enterprise, can you explain the idea of WFOE if, somebody never heard of it before? Like, how does it work versus going there and registering in, say, a national company, which I don't think you could do that either unless, you're a Chinese citizen. Okay, so
as you said, yeah.
Sorry, so can you give them an idea about WFOE? What does it take, and so on?
Yeah, so as you said, it stands for wholly foreign-owned company or enterprises, actually. So it's an independent legal entity. That is actually the most common ways that foreign company come in China. There's different ways. But this one, you don't need a Chinese partner, you don't need a Chinese investor. You can issue invoice / tapiao, which is kind of different from the receipt we use back home. And also you can repatriate some of the profit back home. So this is really the most common formation.
So you said there's other ones. Like, can you mention just a few? I know the most common one is WFOE, but
yeah, there's also the joint venture, which can be complex, and you have to be maybe a little bit careful.
Okay.
But it is often necessary for some restricted industry. And then another one that people think is popular, but maybe not that much in reality, is the RO, the representative office. The thing about this one is it's easier to set up, but it's not a legal entity. You cannot make profit. It's really more for marketing, liaison, research.
Right.
And then the issue with it is that a lot of people would say, we do a representative office and then we switch to WFOE.
Yeah.
But the thing is, there is no transfer procedure. So if you do that, you set up your arrow. Yes, it's quicker, but then you have to deregister it and register WFOE. So there's some cases where an arrow could be maybe meaningful. But you should really consider, is it really what I want? Because in most cases, like I say, the most common is a WFOE for a reason. You can make profit with it.
Sorry, you okay. So you broke out a little bit. So if you just can recap a little bit at the end, that'd be great.
I apologize.
Yeah, no.
Yes. So
you're
representative office. Okay, I'm not too sure where you lost me. So representative office, you cannot make profit. It's not a legal entity. You cannot hire Chinese employees, not directly. You have to go through agency. Yeah. And the issue is you cannot use that as a stepping stone to go to WFOE in the sense that there's no transfer procedures. So you have to really deregister your RO and then register a WFOE. So RO can be meaningful in some cases, but most of the time people will do a WFOE.
So, yeah, I just want to go over RO very quickly. So it's called a registrative office, where you kind of get an office in China, but you can't take any profit. You can't hire anybody. So it's really for somebody that's operating across the board and they just want to do some marketing in China. That's the only thing they can do, right?
Yeah, research, marketing, liaison, but they cannot sign contract. They cannot represent other company. You can hire a limited amount of foreign national.
Yeah.
But for the Chinese, you have to go through agency as well.
So why can't they just why can't they just open up both? They have to deregister one to open up another, like the WFOE, if they want to switch, or can they?
The thing is that there's no transfer. I think it should exist. That would make sense, but there is none. So basically, you're really setting yourself for a lot of work for what kind of return if you really intend to do RO and then WFOE.
Okay.
At this point, maybe consider your business plan and consider which one is the most beneficial and stick to one.
Yeah,
I think is a better plan than having a transfer.
Okay. So the WFOE is really the best choice unless you're in a very restrictive industry. So like, let's say you're in a supplement where it's very restrictive, you need to get a license for that. Maybe a partnership may be better that can help you move things a little bit faster. Now, in terms of WFOE, what does it take for a foreign business to get that going? What does the process look like for them? Like, how do they need to have a heavy capital to be invested in it? Do they, like, how long is the time? What kind of work? What should they watch out for when they go for it?
Yeah, so there's many things, many questions in that question. So usually the first step is the Chinese name, and then finding the office, getting your license, your capital as well. So I will go, I guess, one by one. How long does it take? That's actually going to vary, I would say, on the preparation. If you have your documents ready, by example, you want Chinese name and you're picky about them, which I think is a good thing. But you already have 10 names ready, and it's not like as we ask you thing, you come in with them a week later. That's going to make the process much longer. Then it's going to also depend on local. So maybe some government like Shanghai are more used to it, or they have stricter restrictions. The type of company as well. By example, for WFOE, you have consulting, service, and manufacturing. So manufacturing, you would have to do the fire safety, the environmental check, which had some steps, and then also restrictions. So basically, you have we call them the negative list. The latest update was at the end of July. So you have a list of industry that are restricted. Either you cannot do them, or you need a joint venture, this kind of thing. And also some type of business license can be more difficult to obtain or require more capital as well. So I would say all of these things would influence how long it takes, from I would say a few months to maybe around half a year.
Okay.
So my recommendation actually would be to make a conservative estimate. You know, if you're waiting on that in your plans, and if it's not ready by this time, you start to lose money, then it's better to be conservative in your estimate.
Right. So the shortest you said is at least a few months, right?
Yeah.
Okay. Like 2-3 months, or?
Yeah, I would say around 3 months. Let's say you do a consulting WFOE in a field that is not really sensitive nor restricted. That can go quicker than if you do a manufacturing in a restricted industry, by example.
Is there a minimum requirement for a capital? Like, do I need to put in a certain amount of capital to start a business or register a WFOE?
That's a question we often get. And once again, it varies. So what happened is there used to be, but now there is no longer a minimum capital, but factually there still hits. So the rough rule is you should at least be able to bear the business costs for a year for your registered capital. That would be the minimum. And then, like I said, some business license, it might be impossible or very, very difficult to obtain without a higher capital as well. So it's going to be case by case. But I would say at least 1 year of business expenses.
Okay, so I just want to give people kind of an idea. So what you're saying is the laws has changed. If there is really no on paper legal requirement capitals, but from the approval processes, if you have capital, it's probably easier, right? Okay, cool. So so let's say I'm I'm trying to sell clothes or children's clothes to China. Um, what kind of capital should I really be thinking of, at least on the safe side, to make things a bit smoother? If you don't,
Like I said, you should evaluate of 1 year of expenses at the minimum.
1 year of expense. Okay, so is that calculated? And that's calculated depending on the industry. Is that correct?
Yeah, it's going to depend on your costs.
Okay. Okay. So, apart from WFOE, is there anything else that, foreign business should watch out for when it comes to doing WFOE in China?
To be more general, I think when you compare WFOE versus Chinese company, I would point out 3 points. First, the restriction, as we discussed, that's the first thing you should discuss. You should look at, is my industry allowed? What are the restrictions around them? So that's the first thing you should check.
Okay.
Then when you come into China, when you're setting up, and just I think business in general, you must assume that you will have a higher scrutiny. So yes, maybe your Chinese competitor, they're doing this and it's in a gray area or more or less legal, but you're a foreign company and you cannot afford to do that. Very often, if there's a need for a scapegoat to show, look, we're enforcing the law, then the foreign company is the first place they will look at. So you have to be to make sure you're compliant, even if some other company, local one or not, sometimes.
Right. Right.
And also the third point is more abstract, but I would say be knowledgeable. I mean, I think even between Chinese companies it applies, just that they're maybe more aware of it. But you come as a foreign company, people know that, and people will see if you don't know what you're doing. Either it is your employee who see that you don't know employment law, or your partner, and if they see that you're just foreign business with actually a good sense of how it works here, you might get played. If I can use that word.
Mm-hmm. No, I completely agree. So one of the things you would advise a company to do, because it's going to take months for them to set up a WFOE. It's really for them to kind of understand what it's like to be in business in China. So my wife's Chinese. My father-in-law does a lot of business in China, but he's national. He's real local business. Well, not local, but he's a national business. And one of the things I hear a lot is like, if you want to do business in China, come back and just to feel the culture there and feel the difference there. And the way people do business is actually quite different. Other ways, you can always read up on blogs or things, or our websites or your website. There's a ton of information there, or talk to people that have done it like yourself. So you talked about employment, and I think that's something that once they set up the company, once they're there, there's going to be some kind of employment. And is there a difference, is there a difference between employing someone here, say in the West, in Canada, in the US, versus what should they watch out for, especially if they're a foreign wholly owned enterprise? So I think we lost Norman a little bit.
Yeah, I can hear you now. The image is still froze, but I can hear you.
Okay, that's fine. It's okay. I think people we can deal with the frozen. But if you did you get my question?
I saw you were introducing about employment law, but I missed the specific question.
Okay, so if once as a foreign business, once I set up in China. Okay, there we go. So now you're back. Okay. So as a foreign business, now I have a business set up in China. I have a WFOE set up in China. the next thing I gotta really watch out for, except for intellectual property, we'll touch that a little bit, but I want to talk about employment because that's probably the next thing you want to consider because you want to put in at least some fundamental employments there, right? Somebody, if you're doing customer service, you got to get some customer service, so in terms of as a foreign business employing Chinese employees, what are the employment laws in China like, and what should a company watch out for?
Okay, that's a big question, and there's a lot of things to say.
Okay,
So
so let's
generally,
go over what you think some of them first.
so when I do introduction to Chinese law, I always begin with the same thing, which I would say are the basics. Because I do in a few WeChat business groups or even law groups with foreign nationals, and I see some confusion. I think these basics really help you to have the mindset to understand a little bit how it works. So first, you have to understand it's really top-bottom approach. So the first level is really the constitution, which does not really labor law there. But then you have national law and national regulations.
Mm-hmm.
So the way it's written, by example, when we talk about national law, we're talking about the labor law 95, the labor contract law of 2008 with the amendment of 2012.
Mm-hmm.
And then they're pretty straightforward. Actually, they're pretty simple. And if you start to ask yourself questions on how they practically apply, you realize there's a lot of questions that are not answered. And these will generally be answered locally. So there's really a top-down approach. The law is it's local, especially some topics that are a little bit less addressed in these national laws and regulations. Then it means that the influence of the local level will be even higher.
Mm-hmm.
So that's the first concept that you have to understand. The second one, we're in China and it's in Chinese. As a foreign national, you should have an English version of your employment contracts because you need to manage your employee. But what is binding is Chinese. So even if you have a perfectly bilingual employee, he can play dumb in front of the court and say, I misunderstood that, it's not my fault. And then, so have it properly written in Chinese.
Right.
And then finally, maybe people underestimate that sometimes, but it's actually very employee friendly. So most of the burden of proof will be except overtime almost, will be on the employer. And so you have to really consider that. And also another thing, which might be a mistake of some people do, is that they cannot contract away their rights. So if the law says so, you cannot write in the contract, but we'll do differently. So, and these I would say are the basic. Top down, it's local, it's in Chinese, and it's employee friendly.
Okay, so
that's also why sometimes you will hear people, I heard this, and my friend done that. He's been told by the government that's okay, and then but that's in Shenzhen 5 years ago. Maybe even now it's not the same. But you're in Shanghai, so it's not the same thing.
Right.
So lots of time I see confusion in that regard.
Right. So so one of the, I want to recap a bit. So one of the biggest mistakes foreign business make is thinking that there's one employment rule across China, and it just, if your friend's doing it in Shenzhen, it doesn't work like that. Yes, there is an ultimate, the top-down approach, like you said. There's the national level, and then there's the federal level, and then, but most importantly, there's different rules in every city, the local level, and that depends on where you open up your business, right?
Exactly.
Okay. So, and the second thing you said, I really want you to talk a little bit more detail about, when you use the word that it's employee friendly. So, because I heard a lot of horror stories about China where, termination is like next to impossible. I think you told me that the first time we chatted about this, and you got to have evidence. Can you kind of give some ideas so that people don't get into these problems? Because it's a very big potential problem, right? Because you can be, you can hire the wrong person, and now you're stuck with that person, even though it's detrimental to your business. It's not going to give you a positive return on investment, so on and so forth, or it's worse, is literally destroying your business, and you can't fire that person. But and there's strict laws on that in China. Can you give people an idea about how that works when you say it's employee friendly?
Yes. So so we're user, if you go in our neighbor from the south, so the USA, they're famous for their at-will employment. In Canada, it's more, is it reasonable? And there's a respect of the management of enterprises. But here, termination is another thing. First, there is limited ground, and then there's also heavy consequences for not terminating legally. So in terms of ground, how to terminate, you have negotiation, either initiated by employee or employer. Then you have the unilateral termination by the employee, either with 30 days notice for personal reasons. Basically, it's when somebody leaves a company because they want to. Or you can also have immediate termination for employer's fault. Then you also have the unilateral termination by employers. So either 30 days without employee's fault, economic layoff, or immediate termination of the employee due to the employee's fault. And then it's not necessarily a termination, but you also have the contract expiration, which in some cases can work as well. And then why is it also important? So some of these categories, you have actually a severance payment. So the negotiation, by example, if it's initiated by the employer, if the employee give immediate termination due to employer's fault, if the employer give 30 days without employee's fault for economic layoff, and even contract expiration, unless you propose this at least the same as before, and then the employee refuses, then you don't have to. And then illegal termination. Yeah. This is why I'm introducing severance payment. You have two things that can happen out of it. First, the employee can ask for reintegration. And in the context that there's unfixed term contract, it can be a big deal, or double the severance payment. And the severance payment can go high in some cases. Okay. The calculation for it is basically 1 month of wage per year work. Okay. But there's also, it's a little bit more complex. I think that the other thing to consider as well is that there's a cap to it, which is 3 times the local average wage. So in Shanghai, it's declared by the local government every around spring. So by example, it was the 1st of April for Shanghai. And at the moment, it is 21,396.
Right.
And if you terminate illegally, you have to double that.
You have to double 21,000, and I can't remember the number, but 21,000. You have to double that, and that's RMB, by the way. That's not USD. So
yeah, and that is per year work. And if the employee work for 0 to 6 months, then you pay half. 6 months to a year, you pay 1 year. So your employee who work for you 2 years, 7 months in Shanghai,
yeah,
and is gaining, let's say, let's make it easy, 20,000 a month, so it doesn't hit the cap. So 2 years, it's 3 years, so you're already at 60,000 for the severance payment, right? And then you multiply that by 2 for illegal termination. Right. So you're at 120,000.
Right. So if you do illegal termination, you essentially have to pay 120,000 yen or RMB for that because they're being employed for, you said 2 years, and each
2 years, 7 months at 20,000 kwai. And actually, I think that's still the best case scenario, because the worst one is if they ask to be reintegrated.
Yeah, ask for what?
If they ask to be reintegrated to get their job back.
So I don't understand. Like, so how does that work? How does the reintegration work?
Well, if it's proven that you fire illegally, it's illegal termination. These are the 2 potential things that can happen: either double severance payment or reintegration.
So you're saying that they can literally say, "Hey, I don't want to quit." Essentially, I don't want to be fired. Yeah. And then you can't fire them anyway.
And why it's even worse is that you have an unfixed term contract in China. So basically, you have the project base, which it doesn't happen that often, at least not in the industry I've been dealing with so far.
Mm-hmm.
And then you have the fixed term contract, and then you have the unfixed one. So the unfixed one is there's some condition either after 2 fixed contract or 10-year works, or if you haven't have a contract for a whole year. So which means that in that context, if you try to fire somebody and you fired illegally and they were on an unfixed term contract and they get reintegrated, it's a bit troublesome for the employer and for managing your company.
So they're going to be reintegrated as an on-fixed contract again, essentially.
Yeah, if they were already on a fixed contract. So, and as you see, there's a number of fixed contracts you can have. This is also why, if we talk about probation, it's very important. So one of the most common one being having a 3-year contract, which is the minimum for a 6 months probation. So it gives you a little bit more flexibility to evaluate the person. And also it gives you more time until you reach out that unfixed term contract.
Okay, so but on probation, is there rules of termination on probation as well, or?
It's easier, but it's still not. You're not free to do as you wish. You have to.
So I cannot just say, hey, he's not or she's not competent, and off you go, right? You can't do that.
Well, you have to prove that they didn't fit the employment requirement.
So you.
So you still have to have employment requirements that are well defined, and to prove that they didn't met them. It's still much easier than the other round of termination, but it's better to have clear requirement.
Okay, so when you say proof, what does that mean? Like you literally need to have evidence?
Yeah. So let's take an easy case of sales.
Yeah.
If you have a sales, you should not just say, hey, you need to sell our table. You need to say, oh, you need to sell X amount of table, and also this amount should be reasonable compared to other worker into the industry, or this amount of profit, or this kind of criteria to evaluate as objective as possible.
A quota, right? Okay.
Yeah, and then you record this information, and at the end of the probation, let's say on the 5th month, you come and talk with them and say, well, you were supposed to do 100 and you did 50, and your coworker all did 110. So I'm sorry, you're not fitting the employment conditions.
Is it true that you have to offer them for training before you can go straight for the termination?
Okay, that's another thing. So I was talking really about probation, which is the easier way.
So in probation, you can just say, hey, I'm sorry, but you're not good enough.
So probation, you have to have the criteria, prove that they don't, and then terminate probation, all during the probation period.
Okay.
Incompetency falls under unilateral termination by employee 30 days without employee's fault. And for this, it's a long process. Actually, I was in the law firm before. If you manage to terminate somebody by incompetency, like buy some champagne, it's your day. It very rarely happens because it's such a long process. Yeah. So first you need to have proper KPI, and like I said, that are reasonable for the coworker, for the industry. Yeah. Then you have to prove that they're not meeting them. Then you have to either offer another position or training.
Yeah.
Then you have to prove that they're incompetent again at it. And then you can terminate. So doesn't happen. Such a long process.
You gotta. So if you want to terminate someone, you gotta gather evidence for a long enough period of time to then provide them. Say, hey, look, you're not competent. We're gonna provide you with training first because you can't just outright terminate them based on incompetence. And then if the training doesn't work out, then you can terminate them on incompetency or.
Yeah, and it's such a long process. So very often, this is going to end up in negotiation. But as you're building your case, it's usually going to be negotiated at the end, and you will leave before you finish the process. But as you build your case, the employee see his chance getting smaller and smaller, and also his negotiation power. and then eventually you will agree. As you know, also there is not really a future for that person in the company. So unless that person is very stubborn, it will eventually, especially there's no concept of constructive dismissal in China. So of course it doesn't give you a free card to do whatever you want, but like you can make them very well aware that there's not really opportunity for growth and this kind of thing as well.
Okay. So what if if getting rid of someone under incompetency is next to impossible in China? What usually happens? Like a negotiation that goes down usually, or
Very often. Another one that is also more common would be serious violation of the employer's rule, which gives you the right.
Can you say that?
A serious violation of the employer's rule. So that gives you the right to immediate termination. However, this is dependent on having well-written and clear employer's rule. So that's another more common one. If not, then there's also negotiation is often happen quite often. You just give them a bit of money, and you can leave and keep your career, and we can keep our business.
Right.
So this happened, I think, more often than back than in Canada.
Okay. So the best thing really is to try to hire right in the beginning instead of going through the whole process and then try to get rid of somebody. But in any case, a company should really be hiring right in the beginning anyway. So so in terms of labor laws, I just have a few more questions here. The idea, what about like non-disclosure or non-competing? Like how does that work in China?
Yeah, so confidentiality agreement can be agreed in the contract, and it's actually a prerequisite for a non-compete agreement.
Okay.
And non-compete is a bit more restricted, I would say. So non-compete is up to 2 years, and you have to pay a percentage of the monthly wage for it to keep going. And according to the Supreme Court interpretation, it's 30%. Okay. If you put too low, there's a risk. So it's better to be precise both in the scope of work, the location, as well as the percentage.
Okay. So
and also,
So in order for me to say, hey, look, there's a non-compete for 2 years, I gotta pay for that non-compete, for exactly. The agreed amount, and it's 30% of what, the wages?
Yeah, of the average wage in the past 12 months.
Okay, so is that paid at the end of the contract or like throughout the contract?
At the end of the contract.
Okay, so at the end of the contract, because there's a non-compete, I gotta pay 30% more based on the average wage of the contract to the employee once before you, and that's because there's a non-disclosure.
Well, you have a little bit of leniency. You could maybe not do the 12 months average, but as long as it's about 30% of the average wealth in the wage in the past 12 months, you should be fine. And then as long as you keep paying, then the employee cannot go compete with you.
Okay. So but non-disclosure, that's pretty standard. Like you don't have to pay for that, right? So.
Yeah, that's confidentiality agreement. So this one have a bit more leniency, hopefully.
Right. So like employment laws in terms of all these firing someone or deeming them incompetent, all of these. Is there a difference if I'm hiring someone on like a part-time basis or hourly wage?
So part-time is that you have to pay hourly and you have a maximum of hours. A contract is not necessarily, because full-time employment, it is mandatory to have a contract and there's consequence if you do not. Part-time is not. However, we still recommend to have a contract with your part-time employee because then you can prove that you were compliant.
Okay.
For example, there's a maximum of 20 hours per week. Yeah. It's much easier to prove that you were compliant if it's written in your contract. You will erase your schedule or you will not do more than this amount of hours.
Okay.
So it's better to play safe and have a contract nonetheless.
So it's always good to have a contract, regardless if you're hiring them on hourly or. So, but even if you can hire someone on hourly, you have to give them a minimum amount of hour, right? I mean, that's I mean, it works here. I mean, Canada, that's how it is. I'm not sure about the States, but I assume that there is, right?
I never considered the question.
Okay.
That's true, but just make. I haven't heard of the phenomenon of the 0-hour contract in China. I know I heard about it in the UK.
Oh, really?
But not in China.
Okay, so in UK you can have a 0-hour contract. There's no minimum.
I heard about it a little bit. It's not much my jurisdiction.
You can get somebody to go there to work for 2 hours a month, and that's it, right?
Well, the thing is that they're on call, so then the employer have the full flexibility. We need you tomorrow, and we have a contract. You have to come.
Okay. So in China, like
no, so in China it's really a maximum of hours, and also you cannot have probations.
Okay. Okay. So okay. So we talked about trial periods. We talked about. Is there anything else as a foreign entity try to hire somebody in China? What else would you tell them? Is there anything else that they should watch out for?
I think I haven't emphasized yet enough the importance of your employee handbook. Like we discussed, there's really yes, I only said the broad category. There's some like different reason for each category, but still the ground for termination is limited, and one of them is based on your employer's rule, right?
Yeah.
So having a properly written employee handbook is so important. This is where you can go in detail of what is and is not acceptable and the consequences.
Okay, and you recommend having that in Chinese, of course.
Always, when it comes to employment law, it should always be Chinese.
Right, because you said they can say, well, I didn't understand that, or I misread it, or I misunderstood. Okay, so I think we lost Norman a little.
Oh,
okay, you're back. Great.
Great. So yes, as I was saying, the Chinese is binding, and you use the English only for management purposes.
Okay.
So awesome. This is such an important tool for managing employees in China.
Right, and you say it should be as detailed as possible in terms of what the KPIs are, what themes are. Okay. All right. So it's probably been about almost 40 minutes now. So I just want to go over one more thing, and then I want to wrap this up. It's getting a little bit long. The last thing is, can we just kind of briefly go over the idea of protecting yourself in China, intellectual properties? I know that's a huge topic. It's not something we want to get into in depth because and really you should really be talking to legal advisors in China, because every case is different. But maybe you can talk about it because it's such a popular topic. A lot of foreign companies are afraid, especially given the reputation of China. And I know I'm Chinese, but especially given the reputation of China, they're very much afraid of their intellectual property, not even just intellectual property, but having it, literally knocked off their products in China. And it does happen, right? So
trademark, patents, and copyright. And the thing is that trademark and patents is the first to file system. And I think that's where a lot of the bad reputation come from, and also where a lot of foreign companies do a mistake. Is the moment you're either big or you start to flirt with China, like you have calls or you went to a trade fair, a trade show, you should have already registered your trademark. However, because otherwise you have the high risk of having a trademark squatter, and then when you want to register, it's already taken, or maybe they will reach out to you and say, you can have it for 100,000 US.
Right. Yeah.
That's why a lot of people complain about IP in China. I think comes from there. They don't protect themselves, and then they don't have any recourse because legally speaking, it's not theirs. And I think it's so important. And I remember reading an argument that I like so much was China is the biggest manufacturing country in the world, and when it comes to trademarks and patents, they can block you at the customs. So they can really block you from using the biggest manufacturing country of the world.
Yeah.
So at that point, it's such a simple advice, but you just have to be preemptive and really go and register your trademark and patents.
Right.
And the cost associated with that is not that much considering the budget of a business.
Right. So just kind of looking at it, because we're moving, and a lot of companies, especially a lot of brands and newer products, smaller products, has been trying to go, because of e-commerce, globalization is a lot easier. Okay, I think your connection is a bit bad here. So we got Norman back. We lost a bit of connection, so I restarted this recording. So we were talking about intellectual properties. I think Norman, because the whole, because of e-commerce, because of cross-border e-commerce, a lot of companies are trying to go global now. And I think when your brand or your product gets to the position where they can go global or potentially go global, you're suggesting that, not only get your trademark if you're in the US or Europe, but get your trademark in China. Yeah, because it is a big market there. Is that correct, Norman? So get it early.
Yeah.
Okay. Is there anything else that they should, like, what happened if, they did get their trademark and, they're still being, knocked off, or somebody stole their patents?
Yeah. So if it's, by example, we're talking about e-commerce, if you have your trademark, then you can request, by example, Alibaba to take down some product. If you're big enough and it starts to be an issue, but I think that's really for a bigger company, you can even maybe discuss for us some kind of partnership. Partnership is not maybe the proper word, but to really help not have this kind of issue on their platform. If not, it's when you see a product, then you have to make a request. But the prerequisite is to have register your trademark. Then another thing that you can do, especially if you're in manufacturing, is to block at the customs.
Wait, so you mean you said to block it at the customs? Hello?
Yeah.
Okay.
You can make the request to block product that infringe your trademarks at the customs, so that stops them from selling outside of China.
Right.
Or to maybe like to other company.
Right. So if I take somebody's, trademark and then knocked it off, and I try to sell it outside of China, like say on Amazon Prime, whatever it is, fulfilled by Amazon. And if I had a trademark in China, I can say, hey, listen, I have a trademark. These guys are doing, illegally. I need you to block them at the customs so they can't send it out. Is that correct?
Yeah, that's a very efficient way to do so.
Okay. All right. Okay. So I don't want to get too deep into intellectual properties and trademarks because it's, a real big topic. There's a lot of things going. So I think Norman will agree with me. You should really consult with a legal advisor, especially one in China, somebody like Norman. Now, Norman, I'm sure there's probably a lot more questions that I haven't or is not able to cover in this short period of time. How can they reach you, or how can they reach FDI China? Can you tell them a little bit about FDI China, what you guys do, and what you guys can help them with?
Yes. So, well, first you can look at our website, fdichina.com.
Yeah, I will put. So this is being done for the podcast and as well as our YouTube channel. So I will put a link to FDI China in the description. So if you want to learn more about them, definitely check that out. But sorry to interrupt you, Norman. So go ahead. Keep telling us a little bit more.
Oh, it's all right. That would be a step for me to recommend. You're gonna have probably a lot more details of what I'm gonna say. But basically, we help foreign company to establish in China, and the mindset is really a one-stop solution. So we're gonna help you set up your WFOE. If you have some needs, we can do payroll outsourcing, accounting outsourcing. We can help you also hire Chinese employees as well.
Mhm.
And what we mean by that would be labor dispatch when it's relevant. And this is more for a representative office. So it's really a one-stop solution for foreign company. And then for you, you get some good advice from us, and you also facilitate the whole process, and you can focus on really doing your business.
Yeah, so I really like the idea of the foreign dispatch, especially if you are. So there's a little bit lag still, but I think Norman's gone again.
I can hear you.
You can hear me. Okay, great. So I just want to wrap it up because the internet is getting a little bit. So I really like the idea, especially if you are new to China and you're testing out the water, you don't necessarily want to commit hugely. You can work with FDI China, and get your baby steps in there and have them manage your employees or the very beginning of it, and then you know even though Norman don't recommend not going from RO to Wolfie, but some business may choose to do that.
Yeah. Well, I don't recommend it, but I just say have a really a goal of using representative office. So in some cases, it's really relevant, and you just really want a liaison and to have your business back home, and that works.
Yeah.
But don't see it as a transition from RO to Woofy.
Yeah, I would agree with you, Norman, because one of the biggest thing is people ask us about WeChat marketing. But as you know, in China, if you want to get any kind of account, you need to have a legally registered business.
Yeah.
Just to start, it's not the same in the US where I can just create a Facebook account or whatever and off I'm going. But in China, you need all of that stuff. So anyways, I don't want to get into too much detail. I really, really appreciate your time, Norman. I hope everyone got their questions answered or got a lot of value out of this. Is there anything else you want to tell everybody listening to this? If not, I really appreciate your time and thanks for showing up.
Yeah, I don't have much. If you ever need our support, you can reach us out on fdichina.com, and we're always happy to help a foreign company establish themselves in the PRC.
All right. Okay, Norman. Again, thanks very much. Me and you will keep in touch for sure, always. Other than that, I hope everyone had a good time and enjoyed this whole conversation.